And good. We're rolling. Okay. Hello. We're doing our first remote, and Mr. Steve Sullivan is with me. And with that, Sully is his name. Please introduce yourself to our audience, if you could, and your work.
Yeah. So my name's Steve Sullivan. I'm a training manager for a global enclosure manufacturer.
This is industrial sales. These products are used basically in industry. Big giant computer consoles. Some of them even have their own atmosphere, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Chillers and this kind of thing.
Yeah. So within our portfolio, we've got industrial, which includes verticals like food and bev, maybe petrochemical, and industrial. So you've got your factory environments, which are, variety of different environments within there, where they got to be clean or whether they can be, you might have a leaky roof, you might have a lot of dirt and dust kicked up by forklifts. And then on the IT side, we're doing things with server racks and contained environments where we're providing unique cooling solutions and climate control, like what you mentioned.
Right. You've been in the business, 20 plus years?
Yeah, 25 years.
He's a youngster, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, besides your history in the U.S. Army, young officer, you got out, and what was your educational background? College or?
So college, I have a BS in psychology, and then I went back about 10 years after that and got my MBA in business.
So for those psychology students out there, there still is hope for you. But this is industrial sales, and the reason for it is Sully's other thing is to provide support and training for the sales force and also customers. In fact, that's after the sales service, but actually you're pretty critical in the sales portion as well, correct?
Right. So on the front end, a lot of our new hires are people that come to us. So I do a lot of the sales, and part of our business model too is distribution. And so we've got distribution, we've got manufacturers reps across the U.S. So I provide the technical training and the product training, a lot of the competitor analysis for those folks, and predominantly on the industrial side, but then there's some IT opportunities as well.
And you're doing quite a bit of traveling as well in a training capacity. Are you called on sales guys to help support when you go to key accounts?
Yep, so I'll help support the sales force by going on site, and sometimes it's tech support, and other times it's more of training their sales force. I've got a couple trips coming up within the next month or so. So business is opening up, people are getting back to business, and so I want to be on the move helping folks out in the sales capacity.
You recently had the State Department in, right?
Yeah, we had the State Department in, and we were using some, this was more for some remote installations around the world for IT and some unique climate control solutions for those facilities.
Your sales force, you said you had a mix of distributors as well as direct sales folks, right? What typically is the background of salespeople involved in this selling process?
Well, a lot of times it kind of depends on whether it's distribution, but for the most part, most of them are either mechanical or electrical engineers. They can be, just have a history of sales in general, but most of them, I would say, have more of an electrical background.
How does the sales process begin with this? I know we bumped into each other at trade shows on occasion, but that's one way of generating leads. How's the lead process, the sales process come about?
A lot of that too is our marketing department. Right. So one of the things that we've identified.
And you are in marketing, right?
Typically training is either attached to HR or it's attached to marketing.
HR.
And I've gone back and forth before in both, and currently I'm attached into the HR section. But we've identified some pretty aggressive growth over the next 3 years where we want to be, and in order to do that, to generate that many leads and look at those ratios of calls versus success, we've really ramped up our marketing. And so we've got an online presence, we do social media, we do a lot of distribution calls and direct mails. So it's a pretty big pronged approach to how we go about generating leads, in addition to trade shows. But as you know, trade shows, and especially in the last year with COVID, has dropped off dramatically. And so everything's more virtual now.
Do you have a users group or anything like that, or forums, web forums where your users get on and on the web and can interact with each other or anything?
Yeah, so even our tech support has kind of like the live chats and the live assistants, and then we've also got a lot of folks even on our direct side that they can call in and do business with and provide tech support that way. So, and then online conferences, online forums, like you mentioned, a lot of online webinars and training just to get the word out.
Okay, sounds like it pretty unique. Now, what's the sell price of these products? Capital, are it capital or you have a whole gamut, I know that, but typically, what's the price range on this?
It kind of depends. It depends on the product. So if you're looking at something like we make both carbon steel, we make stainless steel, and if you're looking at something in a carbon steel, if it's a certain size type enclosure, that might run maybe $1,000 if it's a larger one. If you same size in stainless steel, that might go to $4,000. So
Wow.
the material composition, the type of protection ratings that are built around these products, kind of go into price as well. And so we've got.
You also said something about a NEMA 12 enclosure kind of thing with its own atmosphere chillers and this kind of thing.
Right. Well, yeah. So on the IT side, especially, but what we're seeing now is a blend of almost hybrid applications. So there's so much communications and IT data on the plant floor these days. That stuff still needs protected. So it's kind of moving out of a traditional clean space or a protected data center, a small data room, going out into a filthy environment. Maybe not necessarily filthy, but dirt, dust, hostile environment that you might call that. And so you're going to need to protect that to what you mentioned, maybe a NEMA 12, which would be no ingress of dirt, dust, dripping liquids, non-corrosives, to something that even be more protected than that. And then if you're putting that kind of equipment into a closed enclosure, if it's doing a great job of keeping stuff out, it also does a good job of keeping stuff in, like heat.
Right.
So you have to provide your climate control. And so lots of different solutions for climate control to keep those components comfortable, so you don't have downtime. And
I imagine there's a whole lot of regulation that goes in there, like EPA as well on this. If you're generating heat, anything that generates heat is going to be subject to regulation, I would think, because it's got to go somewhere.
Right.
You want to contribute to global warming. Oh my!
And what's kind of interesting is being able to show energy efficiencies within our climate control systems, for example.
Is that a competitive edge on your product line? Or
Absolutely. I mean, we've got some patented designs and products which make us the only provider of those. And so if we can show a huge increase in energy efficiency or the way we do things, then it's a very quick ROI to the end user. And depending on what their currency is, if they're looking for a reduction of carbon footprint, if they're looking at, being able to package more stuff in a smaller space, I mean, that's where we really excel.
So how do you handle sales objections from the competition? I know you told me you had calls in the past. New competition out there. How do we handle this situation?
Yeah, because there's certainly a lot of competitors, hundreds or thousands across the U.S. And you can have
that many. Jeez.
Well, you can have like anywhere from, you got the big boys, which are maybe less than a dozen, and then you've got local tin knockers and what we call mom and pop shops, that anybody that can bend steel and paint it and provide a box, right, an enclosure. But then when you get into the technology side, to kind of,
we're talking about big, expensive, like Cray computer type.
Yeah, and so how you differentiate yourself is you've got some commodity items out there, which there's no differentiation. They don't really do much other than the basic purpose, and then you've got products that add value. And so I think that from our standpoint, what's kind of unique about our manufacturing is the engineering is some of the best in the world, and it gives a lot of benefits, and benefits depends on what the customer is using it for. It can be ease of installation, it could be a lighter platform compared to something else that does the same job that's made of a different material or much heavier, and then you get all kinds of concerns with OSHA and UL, a lot of other things that come into play. And so I think, to separate yourself from the competition, you got to at least present those values. What are the value of your product compared to the other guys? And really, if you do a good job at that, the customer can make their own decision on that.
Plain old features and benefits selling, basically. You mentioned also one unique thing. Even though you're the you are the high price spread in some cases, right?
Well,
And justifiably so. It is a German-based company, as a matter of fact, in the U.S., which adds another layer of challenge to the thing when your boss is 8 hours away. And the only interaction is once a year at the sales meeting when you have your rubber chicken. But anyway, you said even though you're a high price spread, some unique features like your zinc coating gives a definite value, and we're talking about building value here over the competition.
Yeah, so if you're looking at something that may be a commodity item that's kind of still old school in the design, take example what you mentioned about zinc. So if we're talking about a panel builder, somebody that's putting components in an enclosure, electrical enclosure, right, industrial setting, there's certain things that you have to do for that. So the panel prep, those competitors' panel typically comes painted.
Right.
And so you got to grind off that paint, you got to get it down to the bare metal, attach your components, test for ground, and then you got to touch up so you don't introduce corrosion. And there's a lot of steps in that. And so what people don't realize is sometimes those are hidden costs, what we call use costs, that people may not realize that it's involved. And they may look at this purchase price and say, hey, we got a cheaper box, right? And then all of a sudden what happens is you have all these additional steps that cost you money or expense along the way.
Hand labor intensive operations that nobody thinks about until after the fact. Yeah.
Adds up to the bottom line on the company, and it's just kind of dispersed in different areas. So you might not have the purchasing guy that doesn't realize that on the floor they're actually doing all these steps, and the guys on the floor may not realize that there's a better way of doing it.
Right.
And like what you mentioned, if you use a different type of technology like zinc plating, for example, on a panel, it eliminates all those costs.
Yeah.
And so you may pay a little more on the front end, but you're not going to have that intermediate cost, the use cost or the hidden costs. And there's just so many of those if you have a product that adds value.
Not only that, it's a cost of ownership. And think about this. As we all know, with an electrical situation, a phantom short will drive you crazy trying to run it down, chase it down. So how many components could be attached in that console, like 10, 15?
Well, it depends on if the enclosure is the size of a man, if it's that tall and wide, you could have 500 controls in there, and
500 grounds, and trying to run them down as opposed to going with one zinc grounding universally. And if you put it on, you bolt it up, it's grounded. You got these individual wire situations, and that's still how they're doing it, right? That labor intensive? Depends on what country. Yes. See.
Yeah, so you can, and there's a huge safety concern there too. And a lot of the drive guys will tell you that some of their biggest issues in the field are shorts,
right?
And improper bonding or grounding. And so that really, you take that out of the equation if you're using a zinc plated panel or a different type of technology. You don't have to worry about it.
So even though the initial cost is several $100s cheaper, once that phantom short appears and you are down because your system cannot run because of this console having a phantom short, you got to call in a service guy, a plane ticket probably, so that's a couple $1,000s. And what's the average cost? $1,000 a day for service on site?
Yeah, on the electrical side, I'm not sure, but then you've got, the bigger cost is your loss of revenue.
Right, you're not making parts.
Right.
Because that's controlling a production line, let's say. And we know what right now, there's Ford trucks parked all over the USA because they can't get one chip.
Yeah.
What if this was making the chip manufacturing itself, so that's pretty good. Do you do any kind of demonstrations or have distributor day in there or customer day? I know you said at one time you had to host a customer coming in that wanted to see his enclosure being manufactured.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of times, depending on the scope and the volume, we'll have customers that, especially some of these big IT OEMs that want to come to the factory and actually see their product being made and be able to know that you've got the quality checks in place. And so they'll, before COVID, it was pretty often, we're kind of getting back a little bit to that now, but to have customers to come out and they can come to the factory and see how stuff is made, even their particular applications, or we can go to the field. And that's really, when we're talking about competitors, that's the best way in our position to really turn the sale and to get the customer to understand what value is and what it feels like and looks like is when you can put the product in their hands, and even if you can take it and bring along the competitor's box too, or the competitor's air conditioner, whatever, and just say, hey, take a look at this at yourself, and it'll sell itself many times if you've got a good product.
Right, one drags you down, the other floats away, you know. What would you pay the money for, you know? Okay, and final, in closing, any advice you'd like to pass on to younger people that may be going into industrial sales, and advice, and don't do it, run away.
Well, you know, there's a lot of people go into sales just for the thrill and the challenge, and it takes a certain type of individual to be self-disciplined, you know, and then to find out what works. And I would say every customer has their own currency. You can't just say that this benefits and features battle card or whatever is going to work every time. You got to know, because they're going to be using it different ways. It's going to help them to, so you have to know what they're looking for and not waste their time with all the extra stuff, but give them the stuff that they're looking for. And if you can monetize that, if you can take those things and say, look, this is a hard number, what we're going to be able to save you, chances are you'll turn that into a sale. And I think, you know, your integrity, your loyalty, it gets back to relationships. A lot of places today, it depends on what the sales program of the month is, but, you know, there was a hard swing towards nothing but metrics for a while, you know, and now they're kind of realizing that that's not really what selling is about. It's great to have those numbers and understand how you can improve, but you can't take the relationship, and relationships are built on trust and loyalty, and, you know, they know I have one of my sales guys in the field always says, people buy from people they like.
Yeah, that's true. My dad always said that too. That's it. So, okay, that's some sage advice from Steve Sullivan, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and hopefully, Steve, you'll be kind enough to help us in the future.
Do it again, sure.
Yeah, thanks,
Mike.
Mike. Right,
Appreciate it.